I'm going to see some more folks trickling in as we go, but we don't want to keep you waiting. We've got a great session in store for you today. So once again, my name is Christine Gallagher, and I'm the executive director of the Guinn Center. I'm battling a little bit of an illness, and so please bear with me if there's any pause for coughing. My sincere apologies ahead of time, but thank you for bearing with me. But I'm excited to have you with us today for our first look webinar, where we'll discuss the first brief in our two-part series, which is called Literacy in Nevada and the Nation, Understanding Literacy Challenges in Third Grade Classrooms. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you can, please go ahead and remain muted to ensure that we have the best audio quality, not only for the presentation today, but also for the recording that we'll be posting after the fact. But after the presentation ends, we're going to do things a little differently, especially since we have more of an intimate group. So in addition for time for Q&A, we'll go ahead and open the floor for a shared discussion about our literacy research and the topic in general. And so we encourage you to candidly share your perspective, because this will not only help enhance and inform the next brief in this series, but getting input from stakeholders is a value to our work, and it's a value of our organization. So we really appreciate your feedback ahead of time. If you don't feel comfortable participating in the open discussion, please feel free to submit your questions or your comments using the Q&A feature. And you don't need to wait until the end of the presentation for this. Go ahead and submit your questions as they arise. We'll go ahead and collect them as we go and address as many as time allows during our interactive discussion. And so for those of you joining us for the first time, I'd love to share just a little bit about the Guinn Center. We are Nevada's only statewide independent, nonpartisan policy research center. And our mission is to provide objective, evidence-based research that helps policymakers, community leaders, and the public better understand and find solutions to the issues that are facing our state. And we work across a variety of policy areas, including education, health and social policy, governance, and beyond. And in some cases, we track long-term policy impacts and trends for more than a decade. One example of this is our ongoing analysis of Nevada's biennial budget. And in other cases, we respond to urgent and relevant policy questions of the moment. And before we dive into our discussion today, I do want to extend a very special thank you to the Nevada literacy experts and external reviewers who provided their insight, their guidance, and their incredible feedback throughout the development of this report. Specifically, we want to thank Dr. Abby Ozelski from the University of Nevada, Reno, Dr. Tori Palmer from the Nevada Department of Education, and Tim Hughes, Executive Director of Teach for America in Nevada. I also need to acknowledge and want to acknowledge the heavy lifting done by the report's lead authors, Dr. Anna Colquitt, the former Director of Education Policy for the Guinn Center, and Macy Nielsen, a former legal extern from the UNLV Boyd School of Law, who served with us last year in that capacity. Their research and dedication to illuminating the daily realities of Nevada's classrooms, it laid the foundation for everything that we're sharing today. So we deeply, deeply share our gratitude for them. Over the next hour, we'll go ahead and walk through the report's major findings in more of a conversational format. So I'm interviewing, in a way, our panelists, my esteemed and incredible colleagues, Dr. Nicole Thomas, our Director of Education Policy, and Todd Butterworth, our Senior Education Research Analyst. What they're going to do is help break down the data and discuss what's happening in our third grade classrooms, and we'll go ahead then and explore where Nevada and our research go from there. So please join me in welcoming Nicole and Todd as we get started. I know everyone's giving their applause right now, Nicole and Todd.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to you both. So let's go ahead and get started with the first question, and it's going to be for you, Todd. So if you could please, to ground our discussion today, what does the current data reveal about the state of literacy, both nationally and also here in Nevada? And also, with that, how does adult literacy fit into this broader picture?
Thanks, Christine. I think I'll start with the last part of your question first. It's estimated that an astonishing 54% of American adults currently read below a sixth grade level. So think about that. Think about it in the context of today's lightning fast advancements in technology, the intensity of international competition in our commercial sectors. And we can only conclude that at the moment, the US workforce is not well positioned in the world. The the OECD, it's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's an international body. They do an international survey of adult skills in things like literacy, numeracy, and problem solving. Their data show that the share of US adults performing at or below level one, that's their lowest level, in literacy increased from 19% in 2017 to 28% in 2023. So doing the math, that's like a 50% increase in 6 years. And American grown-ups aren't just struggling with literacy. A special analysis of that OECD data shows that US millennials, which is the generation that's really at the heart of our workforce, tied for last place in numeracy alongside Italy and Spain. And they ranked dead last in problem solving among, I think there were 33 nations that participated in that OECD survey.
Oh, well, I have to tell you, Todd, as an elder millennial, I have to be honest and say math was not my strongest. But also I feel like problem solving is one of my stronger skills. So
Agreed.
I don't, it's painful to see that data on behalf of my generation.
You're representing for the millennial generation. Thank you for that.
Thank you for making me feel better, Todd. Um, so obviously, if that's what we're looking at, if that's the state of play for adults, and especially for such a significantly large generational cohort, it stands to reason that perhaps there have been other generational effects, and that American children, in addition to American adults, are struggling as well. Is that true?
Well, according to the 2024 National Assessment of Education Progress, or NAEP, it's often referred to as the nation's report card. Only about one-third of American fourth, eighth, and 12th graders, that those are the ages they test, performed at or above the NAEP proficient level. And NAEP proficient is actually a pretty good level of skill. Between 2020 and 2022, average fourth grade NAEP reading scores dropped by 5 points nationwide. This is the largest single period decline since 1990, and obviously was caused by the pandemic related learning disruptions that occurred.
Right, certainly. And that's a great snapshot of what's happening nationally. So that, of course, begs the question, how is Nevada doing compared to that national average?
On that 2024 fourth grade NAEP assessment, 30% of Nevada's students achieved proficient or advanced status. So 30% were doing great. 29% performed at a basic level, but 41%, the largest segment, performed below basic. On the upside, Nevada's average NAEP score improved from 206 way back in 1998. I think it's shown here on your graphic. 206 in 1998 to 213 in 2024. And now we're at near parity with the national average. However, this alignment really is a reflection more of national stagnation as much as state level progress. Looking back a few years, Nevada had achieved notable reading gains between 2017 and 2019 before the pandemic, following state investments in the Read by Grade 3 program. But then we experienced the post-pandemic declines that mirror those national trends.
Right, right. Thank you. Thank you, Todd, for providing that overview, that framework to situate us in context. So I want to go ahead and turn to Nicole now, to talk a little bit more about how we're measuring progress in literacy and reading. So, Nicole, if NAEP measures fourth grade proficiency, how then do we measure third grade reading proficiency in Nevada?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So while NAEP provides a sampling measure at fourth grade, Nevada evaluates every third grader's language skills with the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, or SBAC in English Language Assessment. SBAC is different from NAEP in that it measures a comprehensive collection of language skills, including reading comprehension and writing, but also speaking, listening, and research or inquiry abilities. So in the 2025 school year, only 45% of Nevada third grade students achieved English proficiency on the SBAC assessment. But there is good news on this front. English proficiency was higher in 2025 than in 2023 at every education level in Nevada, elementary, middle, and high school.
Okay, so how then are different demographic groups performing? I don't want to assume, what happens when you assume, but I assume that there could be some disparities there.
Unfortunately, yeah, there are. On the third grade through eighth grade SBAC exams, achievement levels vary significantly. As one example, the proficiency rates for Asian students are 3.5 times higher than for Hispanic students. And we really need to focus on closing this gap.
Mhm.
And then there are also some groups with extremely low scores. You could see in the graph here that our SBAC data show that only 15% of students with disabilities and 14% of non-native English speakers are proficient in literacy. Economically disadvantaged students also scored 20 points lower on NAEP reading assessments than their financially stable peers. So we do really need to emphasize that these challenges with literacy are not caused by the students. They're caused instead by an education system that's struggling to meet their needs.
Right, right, Nicole. Thank you. Thank you for rightly pointing out that the deficiency is not with the students themselves, with these kids. It's really that struggle in figuring out how to meet them where they are, and as we'll discover in a short while, trying to meet kids where they are across a very broad range within single classrooms. So um, just to focus a little bit more on third grade, and I'll turn this back over to you, Todd. I'm wondering if you can explain to us why the third grade is considered such a critical juncture in a child's education. And if you can talk a little bit about the specific factors that contribute to the literacy challenges that we're seeing today.
Yeah, great question. Third grade represents the fundamental transition, an inflection point from learning to read to reading to learn. So entering fourth grade, students are expected to use reading to acquire knowledge in all their subjects. So if they struggle with reading, they're going to struggle in all subjects. Up to half the printed fourth grade curriculum is basically incomprehensible to students reading below grade level. And Christine, this becomes a long-term problem. Three-quarters of students who are poor readers in third grade struggle all the way through high school. In fact, students not reading proficiently by the end of third grade are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And struggling Black and Hispanic students are twice as likely to drop out compared to their non-proficient white classmates.
Hmm. Todd, and you'll recall this too. I recall an analogy used in one of our previous briefs on chronic absenteeism and talking about the compounding effects of learning loss over time, and what it means, what it can mean long term for students to be disengaged from the classroom. And very similarly, it's the iceberg problem that if there are problems that begin to emerge at an earlier age and they're unresolved, those problems only continue to compound and create bigger and bigger learning issues as time goes on. So I feel like that is really apropos to this conversation as well. So if these problems aren't resolved between third grade and high school, I suppose that could lead to any number of difficulties as these kids enter adulthood.
Exactly. The research shows that low literacy limits economic mobility. It diminishes workforce competitiveness. It even reduces health literacy.
Mhm.
And it also increases reliance on social safety net services. Believe it or not, even juvenile delinquency is strongly linked to poor reading skills. It's estimated that somewhere between 83 and 98% of incarcerated youth read below grade level.
Oh, those figures are truly staggering, Todd. And I know we've probably heard them before, but they never cease to astound. And I'm curious, what your research found are the contributing factors to these childhood literacy deficits.
The research shows there are linkages between the background of a child and their literacy challenges. But I would say these things are not determinants of
Mm.
literacy. But to provide some examples, if a young student's family is struggling with housing instability, food insecurity, access to healthcare, or if there's chronic absenteeism or undiagnosed learning disabilities, or any number of factors that are beyond the control of a young child. It probably also means their parents may be struggling. They might not be highly educated. They might not have a lot of books in the home. And maybe they're focused on more existential matters than reading to their kids. Also, Nevada educates over 65,000 multilingual learners who face the dual challenges of mastering conversational English while also trying to acquire academic reading and writing skills. To think about this from an adult perspective, imagine graduating from high school and then going to a foreign country to study for your degree in a language you don't know. The learning curve would be incredibly steep. But this is what is faced by so many kids in our schools. But Nicole mentioned earlier that we cannot lay this problem at the feet of our children, and she's right. The research also shows that when our schools and teachers are properly equipped, 95% of our kids will succeed in their literacy journey. So there's reason for encouragement.
I absolutely agree. And I think that it's also indicative of so many community wraparound supports, and caring adults, providing books for homes and for kids to enjoy and to read, providing mentorship and other forms of support, all of these things, a supportive and well-equipped army of caring adults
Mhm.
can really see these outcomes shift. And so I'm mindful of all of the people in our state in particular, whether in the public sector, in the education realm, in the nonprofit sector, who are contributing to that army of caring adults. So let's dig into that a little bit if we can, Todd, and talk a little bit about what it looks like to properly equip our schools and teachers and caring adults for this task.
Well, putting first things first, our elementary schools are receiving young children who are already behind, it's a real disservice to teachers in the primary grades. The data show that some 5-year-olds come to kindergarten already 2 years behind their peers. Think about that, 40% behind in their vocabulary and language skills. However, much of this equity gap can be eliminated if we have well-designed preschool education. If you look at the countries that are now lapping the US in the K-12 education race, their kids enter kindergarten with a solid language foundation because their learning began years before kindergarten. Equipping our schools, it also means ensuring teacher prep and ongoing professional development are focused on the science of reading. Recent advancements in brain research demonstrate that very few children will struggle with literacy when they are taught with explicit, systematic instruction that aligns with how the brain forms neural pathways to decode language. Additionally, policymakers and district leaders also need to continue striving to reduce teacher turnover and persistent vacancies in specialized roles, such as reading interventionists. This is especially true in rural and under-resourced schools, and it appears that Nevada is already making progress in this area. Christine, just to wrap this up with an analogy, if our car's engine is burning oil, we're not going to resolve the problem by changing the tires. We know what underlies reading difficulty and how to fix it. In fact, the research isolates 4 specific factors hindering reading acquisition. And these factors are present irrespective of a child's background or demographics. They are deficits in phoneme awareness and the alphabetic principle, deficits in acquiring and applying reading comprehension strategies, and deficits in developing and maintaining reading motivation. And finally, limitations in effectively preparing teachers. If we can help our schools to meet these challenges, students will succeed at reading and writing. And if Nevada can maintain that intentionality of the past decade or so in addressing literacy, there's good reason to believe that improvements will continue.
Thank you, Todd. So turning back to you, Nicole, as part of the research for this report, I understand that we conducted a study examining 10 third grade classrooms across Nevada. So I would love to hear a little bit more about this study. What was the setup of this research, and what was the headline finding regarding reading levels in these third grade classrooms?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So this work was conducted as a research project with a legal extern from the UNLV William S. Boyd School of Law. So the study analyzed interim diagnostic assessment data, MAP or MAP growth or iReady, from 10 third grade classrooms across Nevada. And the sample comprised 6 school district classrooms, 5 urban and 1 rural, and 4 charter school classrooms, 2 urban and 2 rural, covering diverse income levels and demographics. So the headline finding was that in half of the sampled classrooms, student reading ability spanned at least 5 grade levels. So functionally, a third grade teacher in these classrooms is responsible for instructing children performing from first grade or kindergarten levels up to 5th grade levels within a single classroom.
Again, astounding to see the data, that ultimately, describes very much the issues that we're seeing. So very quick question, very quick aside, were there any outliers in the study?
Yeah, so the classroom with the narrowest range still spanned 3 reading levels. However, what I would consider to be an outlier, the classroom with the greatest variation spanned 6 grade levels, kindergarten through 5th grade. In one sampled classroom, only 1/4 of the students were reading at a 3rd grade level, meaning 3/4 of the class read either above or below the curriculum content. So while this study was illuminating, it also had some of its own limitations. The sample size was very small, so only 10 classrooms were studied, meaning that these findings should be interpreted as descriptive rather than representative of all of Nevada's classrooms.
I think that's a great point, Nicole, and we always want to lead with limitations, like letting people know, what these findings tell us and what they don't. And I thank you for situating that study in perfect context where we can look at it as descriptive, but not representative. I think that's a really important distinction to make. So again, knowing that instructors, educators are looking at meeting kids where they are, and where kids are could be so vastly different. what are some of the practical daily instructional challenges for a teacher who is facing this context of a 5 or 6 grade reading span in a single classroom? And maybe Todd, you wouldn't mind taking on this question.
Sure. Christine, our teachers are trained to differentiate instruction according to student needs. However, that grade span variance we found would require differentiation skills to challenge, I think, even the most skilled teacher.
Mhm.
It requires more than minor curriculum tweaks. Instruction has to be fundamentally different for several distinct groups in a single instructional period. For example, a teacher would have to simultaneously deliver foundational phonics and decoding to non-readers while providing advanced, higher than grade level instruction to others. It's a big ask. And, we didn't specifically research it, but I could imagine this instructional strain could contribute to teacher fatigue or frustration, and maybe it accelerates teacher turnover. I don't know, but there's got to be some some fallout from this situation.
Right, without a doubt, Todd. And that really that begs the question about how Nevada has positioned itself to respond as an education system. And so Nicole, I'm curious if you can walk us through some recent investments that Nevada has made in early literacy, and if there are any specific policy recommendations that this report emphasizes.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. And I want to emphasize that it's not all bad. So there's definitely some good news here. Nevada has committed significant policy focus and funding towards literacy, including the Nevada Department of Education's revised Nevada State Literacy Plan and key provisions enacted by the legislature in 2025 through Senate Bill or SB 460. In future briefs on this topic, we may quantify these investments and other investments and compare Nevada's initiatives against best practices in other states. As for policy prescriptions, our report does not make any specific recommendations because we thought that would be the job of future briefs in this series. However, our research did encounter a variety of things that work. For example, requiring teacher prep coursework in the science of reading and English orthography, and ensuring that these studies have been completed as a condition for early childhood and elementary teacher licensure. Ensuring schools adopt high-quality instructional materials aligned with systematic decoding and explicit comprehension research. Expanding quality foundational pre-K programming to address language gaps before kindergarten entry. The ideal scenario would be to offer universal pre-K for all 3 and 4-year-olds. And provide ongoing job-embedded professional development for school leaders and teachers that focuses on data-driven literacy interventions.
Hmm. Thank you, Nicole, for sharing the silver lining that there are policies in place that are intended to make a difference. And that is something for us as a research center we can follow, we can track, we can study, and provide greater insight to policymakers as we continue to tackle this ongoing issue. So, in that spirit, I'd love to hear, and I'd love for all of our attendees to hear about additional research and what, if anything, we have planned to advance what this project has brought to bear.
Absolutely, yeah. So as this report is part 1 in a series, we'll do more on this topic, but we would love to hear any suggestions that the experts and advocates who are with us today can offer. To maybe prime the pump on the conversation, our report suggested a few options. First, it would be great to talk with teachers to get their perspectives on possible data gaps, opportunities for systemic improvement, the effects of test timing and reporting, and how well assessment data equips them to individualize instruction. Perhaps we could expand the 10 classroom study to a statewide representative sample to determine if literacy grade spans correlate with the school type, traditional versus public or charter, for example, geography, urban versus rural, or specific instructional models. It's also important to focus specifically on instructional interventions and the impact that systematic training on the science of reading has on both instructors delivering instruction to classrooms, specifically focusing on classrooms of diverse learners. It would also be great to understand where successes are already happening and what these teachers and classrooms are doing to improve literacy outcomes in their very own classrooms. And to that end, it would be helpful to understand what evidence-based practices exist for catching students up who may need it, and what we can do to better support students who have already, per se, mastered the code. It would also be interesting to investigate how effectively interim assessments equip teachers to individualize instruction in real time, and explore emerging artificial intelligence tools that may be capable of delivering timely diagnostic data that might help teachers to offer differentiated exercises. We definitely want to dig into the policy perspective, since that really is our wheelhouse. In recent years, other states have achieved significant improvements in literacy. Mississippi is a surprise member of that club. It would be interesting to know what public policies, resources, and strategies underpin their successes.
Yes, I think Mississippi has been the surprise member of that group, as you said, that everyone is most interested to learn from. So really looking forward to those insights. And I'm happy to say, everyone, that wraps up the presentation portion of the webinar. Thank you to Todd and Nicole for so seemingly effortlessly breaking down this report and its data and its findings and its insights. It was no small task. I think the months that the two of you have spent to, enhance and refine the report was time well spent, and it's great to see the fruit of all of that labor today. So turning to the chat and Q&A, there are no open questions right now, but that is okay because I have some questions for the group. So right now would be a great time, if you would like, to unmute yourself and share your video if you're comfortable. And Nicole, if you want to pause your screen share or stop your screen sharing, that's totally fine. This is a great time for it, so we can see all the participants on the call. But we want to hear from you, everyone, because your voices are so important to this conversation and to the direction of future research. So we'll go ahead and start by responding to what you just heard. And so I want to ask, what from today's presentation resonated most with you, or surprised you? Anything, any kind of insight or takeaway that you're going to be leaving with today?
I can go ahead for a minute. This is Annette. Thank you so much for the presentation. I love to see that the bright spots that, we are moving forward. I think that what kept resonating to me, and I'm grateful for all the data here, is that the impact of our teachers being able to utilize the AI tools and the technology to lessen this load. I think that is where our future lies, and I'm wondering if we have areas in our state or across the country that are utilizing that, because we know that, again, they can get that instant, and not to replace the teacher, right, but to supplement them. And I've been able to see some amazing things happening with that, and so that really resonated with me about what the future will hold and what that can mean for educators. To be supported in that. I love the focuses and the things. I agree with all those things that we need to focus on. The teacher retention, the science of reading, all the things you're mentioning, and I think that's why we are seeing success here. The other thing that I was concerned about is the subgroups, obviously, and also wondering where we've seen successes, other places, or even here in our state with individuals that are experiencing homelessness, foster care, whatever it may be. So, but yeah, thank you so much. Those are just some things that are resonating.
Thank you, Annette. Nicole and Todd, I don't know if there's any thread you want to pull there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annette. I really appreciate the insights. Responding to kind of the differences in the demographic groups, this is why I'm also really interested in the science of reading specifically, because if you are teaching students in a systematic and explicit way, you are reaching 95% of students. And that's regardless of background, demographics. And that's what's really important and interesting, in my opinion, about having just quality instructors who know how to teach to that level, who know how to teach the science of reading, because you're really able to close those gaps within the classroom, irrespective of what's happening outside of that as well. So we'll definitely talk more about that in our future briefs as well.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I think the pupil-centered funding plan is going to pay dividends because it's getting more money to those struggling, underserved schools to pay for literacy interventionists and early help in the primary grades, particularly around reading and writing. And so I think we're going to continue to see improvement in that area, knock on wood. Regarding AI, um, I just I I'm kind of an AI optimist, a guarded optimist. Um, I think that some tremendously helpful tools are coming down the pike, and it's changing so fast, month by month. But I think teachers could really be empowered with really specific data, perhaps with AI identifying long before humans ever would that a child might have a learning disability, and that there could be intervention on that really early in the process to get a child back on track. And then also in differentiating instruction, how much easier would it be for a teacher if some sort of AI tool could ensure that every kid is being properly challenged in their literacy growth journey. So yeah, great comments, Annette. Thanks.
I would.
What can I say one more? Sorry, I would be remiss too. This is just I'll always, we need to start earlier, right? I was a kindergarten teacher myself for a number of years, but that investment for Nevada for those early learning education opportunities, that's just always, that's what we need as well. So, and I see our director on here, so that reminded me that we focus on that. So thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. It appeared as though there was going to be some momentum in the last legislative session for universal pre-K for 4-year-olds, but then the budget just didn't have the money sufficient to be able to do that. But I think it showed there's at least a desire among policymakers to go down that road, and there are a lot of people now advocating for a Department of Early Childhood to focus on that foundational time, not just for kids, but for our society. And I think I heard that yesterday at the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Education that they introduced, or they're going to introduce a bill draft request to have some sort of early childhood department. So that's good news all around.
Thank you so much, Todd. And we can't shy away from the interconnectedness of these issues, and even taking it a step further. I know, Nicole and Todd in particular, in just a few days, we'll be kicking off a study on Nevada's childcare landscape, and connect. Of course, that study connects to a lot of these themes as well. So, we're at least doing everything we can to get our arms around the entire topic and all of the intersections where it connects. And so we're really, really privileged to be doing this research and to be looking at all of the facets of this issue. So really quickly, before moving on to another discussion question, I would love to invite anyone else on the call to reflect back anything from today's presentation that they're taking away, anything that resonated, anything that shocked you. Please feel free to open your mic and turn on your video if you like and share.
Christine, this is Dolores Hauk. I just got out of the pool, so I'm not going on video.
Fair enough, Dolores. Thank you.
But I appreciate all the work that's being done in the leadership by Jill and the team. I want to speak as a dinosaur on this information, as being the founding person to bring early childhood education as a priority, led by you pay for the high chair or the electric chair, which was really a revision of what Hoover said. The electric chair is not a cure for the cause. But moving forward in 2005, I'm going to say 0405 to 15, this work around early childhood education and bringing the standards up for the teachers in the child care centers was the focus for United Way of Southern Nevada, and I led it for 10 years. It has evolved into Nevada Ready, being fully funded by the Department of Ed and less on the private donations. What I want to say about this whole kind of like spinning the wheels, I think the best that came out of those initial times was government, juvenile justice, Metro was able to speak to all the business chambers and say why it was important and how they would benefit 20 years from now. I brought in people from the Fed Reserve, Minneapolis Fed Reserve. We had at that time Sonia and Stephen Horsford were the face of making the change. And what happened was I was able to have the CCSD provide a unique identifier for every child so we could track. I had 44 child care centers that were part of the contingency, and they were able to track and prove the differences according to where they entered the system, the kiddos from the child care centers. At that time, we had 6 nonprofit through Catholic Charities and Variety. So again, I'm speaking what started 26 years ago and has evolved, but would be happy for people to pick my brain and offer that from my heart. What's really important is the business community had to understand how it impacts them because of the contingency of I don't need schools anymore. My kids have graduated. All of that really impacts where policy is made. The first thing that I was able to do with the support of legal and the school district was to raise the standard. At that time, to work in to be a teacher or a director of a child development center, you could be 16 years old and have a health card. You didn't need anything more than that. And that's where we started, is raising the training standards, having people, getting computers into the schools, things like that. So I just would love to be able to say there's been progress. There's been a lot of money that has come into the state because of how we fail rather than the joy and success of what we were able to track these kiddos from 3 years old all the way through 5th grade. And all the people like me and the people in the school district that agreed to that are no longer in those positions. But it worked, and we could really justify how the community and government and private could uplift the entire state by investing in where we knew the gaps were. And it wasn't, there was less bureaucracy because it was private money. So I know that was that was a data dump, but happy to share if anyone has questions. I see hope that the conversations are more normalized instead of why would we pay someone $12 instead of 10, which was where we started. And the childcare teachers wanted to blow noses and tie shoes and give hugs. That was why they were doing the work. And so to evolve into the pride of the job, and we use the probably now 36-year or so longitudinal study out of High Scope, which is the longest longitudinal study of children to adulthood and all these pieces. And we had them as a third-party evaluator. So open to questions, open to brain sharing. And thank you for doing this work and bringing it forward. And we have to involve the education system has changed, not enough. But we have brought in a lot of funding based on where we can say we're failing. And I would love to bring the conversation forward with this is how we know it works in multiple years, multiple settings, and how we will track it. And thank you for letting me speak.
Dolores, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and wisdom. And just so you know, when you referenced yourself as a dinosaur, Todd raised his hand, and you're not a dinosaur to us. We really appreciate your feedback. And I have to say, when as it pertains to our research at the Guinn Center, one of the single most predictive aspects, regarding the success of our work and the success and the degree to which we're able to understand issues directly links to data infrastructure. That is in a lot of ways, the single most important thing for us as we do our research and analysis, which of course, the more we know, the more we can right size and create and craft policy solutions that we hope would be more effective. And so we hear you loud and clear when it comes to the importance of data collection and monitoring and allowing that data to tell the story, and not just to tell the story of what's not working, but to tell the story of what's working. Both of those things are wildly important pieces of the puzzle. And so that leads to another discussion question that I have for the group, and I want to explore two sides of the coin. I would love to hear what you think is working in Nevada's literacy space, what interventions are successful in your view, and what barriers still remain in the literacy landscape, and what barriers exist to progress.
I can chime in real quickly, Christine. I'm super encouraged to see that the Department of Education, under the leadership of Superintendent Wakefield, is really focused on the science of reading. I really had not done a lot of research on literacy since I was back with the Legislative Counsel Bureau about a decade ago. And the science really has advanced a lot during that time. And the science of reading understands, they've actually been able to look at how the brain functions while it's learning to read and write. Speaking is a natural thing for us as humans, but reading is not. In fact, it's almost counter to our natural wiring. And so by using the brain science, they understand now exactly how the brain works to acquire reading and writing skills. And because the Department of Education understands this and is focused on it, I think that the investments we make in literacy assistance are going to be, they're going to pay off much more than they have in the past. Certainly what was done with Read by Grade 3 back in 2015 under the leadership of Governor Sandoval made a difference. It definitely helped. It got a lot more adults on the case and helping kids in the primary grades to read and write. But how much more effective will their efforts be if they're doing it according to the science in a way that's super effective? They're going to be teachers are going to be working smarter more than harder. And so I'm really encouraged by that.
Todd, thank you so much for sharing those insights about what's working. And I almost feel as though it's a shameless plug for Todd momentarily. It's just a quick aside. He's actually working on a research brief series right now that we'll be releasing throughout the fall about what's working in Nevada across several policy domains. And so much more to come from Todd on that in terms of the silver lining that we see in the Silver State. But I'd love to open up that conversation again. If anyone is willing to unmute and lend their voice and share, what do you see that's working in the Nevada literacy landscape, and where are those barriers persisting to literacy advancement in Nevada?
This is Susan. I'll just chime in. Um, I live in Elko, and our district is very spread out. And I think one of our challenges is getting qualified teachers. You know, we have areas that have long-term subs, and some of them are wonderful. Some of them um, do their best. Uh, and I just think that's a challenge. The information that I've heard throughout this webinar has been, um, I just have really enjoyed hearing all the information. Things standing out of teachers are at a disservice, a disadvantage because of the 5-year-olds coming in. Like, I never thought of it that way, of how challenging that must be to teachers. I think the science of reading, I don't know a lot about it yet. Just all the good thing. I haven't heard anything bad about it, which is wonderful. So I think that is going to make a difference. I was almost thinking, is this something that we should start having certifications in just K2 or something different than, I was just thinking, I'm a former elementary teacher. And I was taught the upper grades, which I know reading is still involved with all of that, but it's not the same as if I were put into a K classroom or grade 1 or 2. Coming from 6th grade, I would have needed a mentor big time because, and I'm a dinosaur as well. So, when I went to school, they just, you just, here you go. And then you were expected to be able to teach any grade level. And I just don't think that's true, because I think teaching 6th grade is a whole lot different than teaching kindergarten or 1st grade. So I think the training is different. I do think we're getting pointed in the right direction. I appreciated the information on um, 3rd grade, especially because of this read by grade 3 and retaining kids. I'm so torn on that subject, because then I hear great information, and then on the other hand, I'm like, what are we doing to kids retaining that? So that balance. So it's been wonderful to hear all this information so I can make better decisions for my district and for the state. So thank you very much.
Oh, Susan, your presence is so valuable for so many reasons. We're so grateful for your educator perspective, and also for joining us from Elko. We really do value all of our communities in this state, and we would love to keep the conversation going about what you're seeing, and what you're experiencing, what kids are experiencing and educators are experiencing in Elko, in the Elko School District. Please, if you would be so kind, remain a friend of ours so that we can continue the conversation. And I think you bring up some interesting points about what it would look like to pursue certification, specific science of reading certifications for educators, or making sure that educators are aware of that distinct shift that happens in the 3rd grade of learning to read, transitioning to reading to learn, and how different that makes the educators experience as well. But I'd love to hear from Nicole or Todd or anyone else on the call for any reflections on anything that Susan shared.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christine. Susan, that incredible insight, and I really appreciate you tuning in. As an educator myself, I care deeply about like quality educator preparation, because it's hard to teach. Like, teaching is a hard job. I think there's just so many things that go into it. That's not just like the pedagogy of it, but also like classroom management, personalities. Like, there's so many things that go on. So when we think about this, I like to think about it from a bottom-up approach, where you start at the beginning of the pipeline, and that starts in the actual college training, right? In the preparatory spaces when we're training our educators. And the same can be applied to early childhood spaces as well, where it's how do you provide quality instruction to these individuals so that they could provide quality instruction as well. So I think there's a lot of work being done at the state level to kind of reform and refine a lot of our teacher preparation programs. And that's why it's essential that everyone is kind of on the same page there, right? So it's us having these conversations, it's the Nevada Department of Education, also talking with the districts, also talking with all of the different universities and NSHE, and to make sure that our teacher prep programs are aligned and that the teachers that we're helping provide these degrees, we're able to train them well. And same goes for our teachers who are already in the classroom, right? So it's being able to update that professional development and providing the time and the space and the funding to provide, to really update what we know. Because there are a lot of really fantastic teachers who have been teaching for 20 years who are clearly good at their job. And it would be great to just have the ability to be able to kind of update them on, hey, what does the science say? What are we doing right now? Um, and that's how we kind of all come together to better education across the board.
Hmm. Nicole, thank you so much for providing some of that context of, what an educator's journey looks like as they're going through their process of becoming educators, and how that informs this conversation of how it passes down to students, obviously. So I know we're out of time. It's 11 o'clock, and if possible, I just want to hold on to you for maybe 2 more minutes and address some of the excellent comments and questions that are coming through the chat. So Annette, in regard to the science of reading, Annette is wondering if we know how many of our educators are specifically trained in the science of reading, perhaps to a degree different from what they might receive as part of their standard training. Is that knowable?
Yeah, so I cannot remember the name of the report at the moment, but there was an institute that did a study on the different colleges and the training pathways. And I believe that two of our institutions are currently aligned with the science of reading in building it specifically into their teacher training. But as Nevada as a whole, I don't believe we have that number. That's something that I would really like to find out and potentially include in future reports.
Mm-mm. Without a doubt, Nicole, and underscores again, our work is better the more data we have, and so we're always looking for deeper and richer insights to describe the experience of the education system in this state. Um, so really, really quickly, just a couple more things from the chat. And while I announce some of these things or post some of these questions, I would love it if Nicole and Todd, you could put your email addresses in the chat so that we can continue the dialogue after this webinar is over. But I think I'd like to close with two wonderful comments from the chat. First, from Gianna Von Savoy, our incredible communications coordinator here at the Guinn Center, who is particularly interested and passionate about this aspect of our research, and she recommends to all of us that if we're interested in learning more about the science of reading, to tune into the podcast "Sold a Story" if we haven't already heard of it. Thank you, Gianna, for that recommendation and reminder. Really appreciate that. And then finally, from our wonderful research director who's joining us from who knows where in Las Vegas right now. It looks like you've got a lovely tree in the background, and a lovely green blob. And so we could not ask for anything more. But Michael wants to know from you, Nicole and Todd, to close us out today. After conducting this incredible research and reviewing new initiatives designed to address our literacy challenges, do you feel more optimistic or perhaps more concerned about literacy in Nevada? Or both? Maybe there's a gray area in between.
I feel like there's always gray areas or silver linings.
Always.
But I do feel more optimistic, and that's simply because I think we have a roadmap. There
Mm,
are a lot of other states we're seeing really fantastic gains in literacy achievement, and literacy outcomes. And that gives me hope that I think we're finding a way to align our policies and procedures and minds, to really make progress. And that is something that makes me feel a lot better, especially after seeing some numbers that might not make you feel so good. But I do think we're moving in the right direction.
thank you, Nicole. How about you, Todd?
Um, 2 years ago, I led the Guinn Center study. You might want to check it out. It's called From Crowded to Coordinated, about early childhood governance. And we looked at what's necessary to manage a well-functioning early childhood system. And in that study, I began to understand the necessity of doing early childhood right in a society. But doing this literacy research just really hit home the absolute necessity that we do a better job before kindergarten with our children. And so I'd say that was probably my big takeaway. But I am encouraged by the fact that the legislature is already talking about this. You know, if we had universal preschool for our 3 and 4 year olds, it would benefit families in that they would no longer have to pay for 2 years of childcare and struggle to find a place for their kids. So big benefit for families. For businesses, their employees would be a lot less stressed, maybe would even be able to return to the workforce because for those 2 years, their kids' childcare needs, actually education needs, would be addressed. And for the kids, a 2 year jumpstart on these difficult literacy skills that they're going to need to address in grades K through 3. And so I think if we had 2 years of preschool, there aren't going to be many kids in third grade where we're going to be faced with that tough decision. Wow, should we hold this kid back because they're struggling so much with reading? I don't think many kids will be.
Mm. Todd, that is a huge point of optimism to think of a future where families and their children are perhaps struggling a little less, and the barriers have been whittled down a little more, and are more easy to overcome. So, thank you for sharing that vision. And thank you for all of your research and passion, Nicole. The same to you. For both of you, I'm reminded just how incredible this team is, and I think my point of optimism as the mother of a 1 year old who will one day, aside from just feverishly flipping through books, who will hopefully one day read them and one day love them and one day learn from them, learn from his reading. I am really grateful that the two of you are on the case, and I'm grateful for this community, for this army of supportive adults who are on the call, who are interested and passionate about this subject with us. Please keep the conversation going. Reach out to Nicole, reach out to Todd, reach out to me, reach out to any of our staff. You can find our contact information on our website, guinncenter.org. And I'm happy to say that this research brief will be published today. And so we'll go ahead and send out a special email to all of you on this call so you can get a first sneak peek, as we do. So thank you so much, everyone, for hanging in there a couple of extra minutes. I believe it was valuable. Thank you for your time, and we will see you again soon.
Take care, everybody.